Leave it there because
Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself and Greg Terry, who was myself, Jonathan MS Pierce, for those who don't know me, and my friend Greg Terry, where we are going to talk about everything going on in the world at the moment.
yes.
And he was just going to start talking about the background there. And
well, we were discussing the background, and for everyone on my channel, welcome. We're both co-streaming this. And whenever you co-stream, somebody has to host it. So JP's hosting, but we are co-streaming on both of our channels. And if you've not subscribed to JP before we get started, please go and do so at ATP Geopolitics and vice versa. But you guys know our relationship and our friendship. Yeah, we were discussing actually the backgrounds, and JP was right before we went live. He says, man, I think I need to change this to a global background, but it was very bright and white, and it didn't look the best. And then I said, you know what? I said, let's stay with the Ukraine flag because that was what it was. I said, no, I don't like that. And get back to the blue and yellow because unfortunately, and Johnny, we're going to go and I've got questions as well. And I'm fully caught up, not feeling the best today, but all good. Unfortunately, Ukraine news being pushed off to the side and Ukraine doing some good things. And I don't say that judgingly, because even inside Ukrainian media, 80% of their news they're talking about is the war in Iran. So it's just having a domino effect. So we'll keep that blue and yellow.
It's a really important crossover as well. So there is direct effects on Ukraine with regard to, say, things like PAC-3 Patriot interceptors that they might be wanting to get from the US. Now the US are going to be wanting those to be stocking. In fact, Trump has been talking to Lockheed Martin and others about production schedules.
That meeting today, I don't mean to interrupt you, but additionally, so for me, guys, I source things differently. From working so many years around the world, I have people in different regions of the world that I trust and follow. And then, of course, I follow other analysts and news sources that I trust, not mainstream. And then I can, condense it all, put it together, translate what needs to be and get it out. I've already seen a lot of information coming out of Middle Eastern sources that are both anti-Iran, pro-West or pro-Iran. And I mix them so I get the true picture. But Iran's already recovering a lot of PAC-2 tags from the PAC-2 missiles, stating that we're already in a critical low supply of PAC-3 units. And now, as you said, coming to the White House today is all of these manufacturers to meet with Trump. So there's no question that the supply is messed up. It's easy to see.
Yeah. Washington Post says US burns through precision munitions air defense interceptors in Iran. I mean, that's always going to happen, right? US is rapidly burning through precision weapons and missile defense interceptors just days into the Iran campaign. Of course, by the US, you can also assume that's all the Gulf states who will be using the US kits. There will be US kits stationed in the Gulf states, and there will also be their own stuff, which is probably US as well. All of them will be drawing from the same manufacturing sources. There are places like Japan that make these under license. I don't know if they make the PAC-3, but anyway.
But once again, it's strategy as well. And for me, I really don't listen to any nation when it talks about their supplies. I'd rather just see the proof in the pudding. I've read Russian news from 2022 where their own analysts were going, we're going to run out of missiles by the fall of 2022 at this rate. And of course, we see that and what's happening there. So yes, is there a critical shortage? I don't know if the word's critical yet. Is there a shortage? For sure. Additionally, I don't know if the United States expected Tehran to be like Caracas in a couple of days. It just be over. We take out the leader and okay, everybody's going to lay down their arms and we're going to start a new country. But in addition to that, as far as the planning of this war, the United States is now having to experience what Ukraine deals with daily. And that is this combination strikes of Shahed drones, and you're burning through $1 million air defense to take out a $50,000 drone. And I think that is a part of the long game play here as well. So I don't know, but we watch it for sure.
Yeah. Just to remind people, PAC-2 can shoot down cruise missiles and drones and aircraft. PAC-3 are the ones you want to shoot down ballistic missiles with, and they have slightly different technology, a slightly different way of shooting things down, but they're both shot from the Patriot missile system. But the PAC-3 interceptors are obviously what everyone's going to be wanting to use, because the Iranians are using a lot of ballistic missiles, so that's important. And of course, that's what Ukraine also wants, and they've been asking for some time for the US and Trump to green light licensed manufacturing in Europe so that there isn't a bottleneck, and that was expected to happen. Trump had said, in words that he was going to do that, but he has subsequently not allowed to, or not got round to. I don't know what's gone on, but they're not making them under license in Europe, which means there's still a bottleneck.
Yeah, there is a bottleneck, and the longer this goes on, and we've heard it even from our own administration here, they've talked about over the last 4 days, we expected 72 hours, we expected 3 to 4 days, we expected 2 weeks, we expected 4 weeks, this may be 6 or 8 weeks, and then we have people like Blumenthal come out of closed door meetings and go, this is a little bit more complicated than I thought, and now I'm very alarmed. And now we're even here from both sides of the aisle, boots on the ground. So I don't think anybody can predict what's going to unfold. But as far as this change happening quickly in the world, coming together and holding hands and singing Kumbaya, forget it. And we're already seeing the effects of a 90%, 92% closure of the Strait of Hormuz. That's the number right now.
So for the benefit of your audience, because mine would have heard this multiple times, but I just want to very quickly run through my position on Iran, just to get that out of the way and see if you agree, and that then we can use
this is going to be good
to go on. So my position is, I don't like Islamic fundamentalism, and I do not like dictatorial regimes, and I do not like theocracy. So I do not like the Iranian regime one iota.
I agree.
Not a fan of it. Would love to see it collapse and be replaced by democracy.
Pause. I need to interrupt, because you're talking about one section there, the theocracy, and of course, dictatorial leadership, et cetera, et cetera. I'm so thankful that here in the United States, we do not have a theocracy, especially in lieu of all of the military commanders coming out and saying that President Trump is anointed by Jesus to bring in Armageddon. So
interesting.
Little tongue in cheek there for you. Couldn't help it.
Yeah. Well, I think separation of church and state by the founding fathers is super important, and it's good for every religious person, because if you have pluralistic society with lots of religions, then you don't want a religious fight one over the other. So you have to have a secular society, and secular in the technical sense, whereby you don't favor any religion and you separate religion from how you run a country. And that I think is really important. That's obviously what's not going on in Iran. But so I don't like the Iranian regime. But I also understand that vigilantism is illegal. So, for example, if I suspect there's a drug pin living in a house opposite the road, I'm not going to go and burn the house down, because I would be in prison for murder, right? Even though that person is a bad person, as far as I'm concerned. And you might argue that a good result has come out of me burning the house down. Yeah, but actually we should let the police do that. We should let the law take over. So we should be letting international law prevail in this case. Now, the problem is we don't have international policemen, so it starts getting a bit complicated. But essentially, the US has committed to an illegal war that has as of yet, no legal justification. As soon as it does, it's a different thing. But at the moment, it doesn't have legal justification. It's not constitutional. And if you start allowing the US, if we see the US breaking international law willfully, as they also did with Venezuela, I think too, and they are stealing Venezuelan oil, then we start seeing a validation of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because then there's no law, and then it's just law of the jungle, and you can do what you like. And actually China then starts saying, well, we can invade Taiwan, and then anyone else with strength just goes, well, we can do this against these weaker people. And so it is very dangerous. We need to separate these two things. We should be able to hold two ideas in our heads at once, which is, one, the Iranian regime is bad, but two, the US is not following the rules and norms in what they're doing, and therefore shouldn't be doing it in that way.
Okay.
Not yet. Without.
Let's also then let me interject into that before you continue on. Regardless, and I agree with an overwhelming majority of what you said there. And for those of you that are new to my channel or new to Johnny's channel, we're on polar opposites of politics in many things, polar opposites of religion. I'm a Christian. He's an atheist. But we're best buddies, and we agree on so much. It's unbelievable. And I'm just honored to call him friend. But let's look at it this way. So what about long-term planning, strategic planning, when you do something of that nature? For example, we took out Maduro. We left in Maduro's vice president still. And in reality, she's still calling for the release of Maduro while trying to talk nice to the USA. So that's just one example, like with crowns. Very
no
simple.
planning there.
No planning.
That evolved almost organically. And
okay.
Thinking,
Now, we now have the replacement for Ali Khamenei. It's his second son. His name is Moshtaba Khamenei. He is the son of Supreme Leader. And according to all the people I follow and trust, both in Iran, in the Middle East, in Pakistan, in Israel, he is 10 times more dangerous than his father. Whenever you saw the tweets coming out, he never leaves his father's shadow. He actually was the one running the father's office. He was the one tweeting on the father's account. He's very close to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard forces. He is the one that was responsible for execution of civilians or protesters, and the list goes on and on. So it's like there's no strategic planning, and that is very disappointing for me.
Yeah, so I think there are two things going on here as well. So from a operational point of view, the United States and Israel are doing, I think, probably a phenomenal job militarily, right? They have
no question,
incredible capabilities and incredible capacities at the moment, and they are blowing up. I mean, the submarine destruction of the frigate was just incredible from a military point of view, although one must remember that's like 100 people just killed there. But anyway, it's war. Or, well, it is war, although some people are claiming it's not war, that it's just
no, it's a special it's a special military operation with the aim of demilitarizing Iran, taking away the nuclear doctrine from Iran, establishing a leadership regime change because it's an evil regime, and establishing safe zones for those nations around. I'm pretty much sure that's the same doctrine that Putin's using against Ukraine, just in a different language.
Do you know what? I hadn't quite registered that parallel, and that is absolutely on point.
I don't feel that well today, and I am so grateful that I was able to give you that parallel.
You got me the one up on me, yeah.
It is the United States stated agreements, the demilitarization of Iran, take the regime change. They don't call it the regime change, the toppling of the evil regime leader of the nation in hopes of a better future, which would be if the United States and Israel and other nations, European nations, assist in that, would be a leader sympathetic to Western ideology. The same thing that Russia is doing to Ukraine.
We'll come back to the idea of regime change in a second. So where I was going is we can hold these two things where the Americans are doing and the Israelis are doing this incredible job of decapitating the Islamic regime and blowing stuff up just incredibly. And yes, there will be mistakes, and that is not unusual for war. So the school getting blown up, who knows I don't know whether that's electronic warfare or air defense or just the wrong coordinates or whatever. So horrific things will happen. Unfortunately, it is the nature of war. But I think generally speaking, the Americans are doing a really good job operationally, but strategically, like you said, and this is what all the politicians have said coming out the classified briefing, is that they came out, and we have also heard, I had some pushback from some pro American strikes people on my threads this morning saying, look, I'm with you on Iran, but these guys are bad people, blah, 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 blah. It's like you cannot criticize Starmer for not helping out the Americans here when the Americans have given us 4 different reasons from 4 different people, like Trump, Rubio, Vance, and Hegseth have given us 4 different reasons of why they're doing this, which means that your objectives are not clear. Why would we come and go, yes, let's send our troops in and bomb this exactly like you say, just because you've asked us to, not because if you haven't given us a clear set of objectives and a plan of how this goes, then that's insanity for us to get to go in boots and all, right? And so we've had regime change, we've had demilitarization, we have had denuclearization, we have had freeing the people and the humanitarian. Is it which one of those is it all of those? Like, why are you all telling us different things? And then some, like Rubio, even went back on himself. So there is chaos there, and that is a real worry, because what also, and sorry, I've been talking too long, but from the briefing, they very clearly were told or not told what the long-term plan is for the people, for putting after the bombing, there appears to be no plan, and that is a serious concern.
I would agree. And listen, please do not misunderstand me here. I got a good chat here from a good let me see, because Daniel Cheatham, 5290, Greg, it's not an illegal war. They have the right to strike Iran because of nuclear threat and so on. Okay, I understand that.
No,
I'm not.
So okay, I would disagree with that, because they said they obliterated the nuclear threat. So in their own words,
that's where I was going. Okay, we get down to nuances, and that's the problem. We get down to nuances. It's a legal war. It's an illegal war. They have nuclear. They don't have nuclear. And once again, that is because we have no proper information and reality. It's like you said, why Starmer will not just go in and say, okay, well, we're going to do this. We're going to do this in support. We're going to open up Diego Garcia. We're going to do this, that, whatever it may be, whatever. And now we know we have stress between Trump and Starmer. We have stress between Trump administration and the nation of Spain. We have European nations like Merz saying, no, we got to stand with Spain. They're part of the EU. We just have chaos unfolding. But it's hard to get a clear position when the positions and the statements change every few hours. It's impossible to get a real picture when Rubio changes his narrative 24 hours later. It's hard to understand the true picture when Trump says one thing and Hegseth says another. We're very, very poor at laying out the plan, the steps of action, and that is because I really believe that we do not have an end game for this. I firmly believe that due to the narcissistic mind of Donald Trump, and I'm not here to pick on Donald Trump, but due to the narcissistic mind of Donald Trump, once he hears 5 or 6 things that is relevant to him, and he goes, okay, that, okay, go bomb them. And the quote was, there will be no aborts. Go start this thing. And that's his reasoning. There's not a lot. I think this is why
military flex. It's a military flex. He's got away with it in Venezuela. He feels on top of the world. He feels really powerful. Like he thinks he's got the raw power of the US military might at his fingertips. And he's like, well, why wouldn't I? We can control Iranian oil. We've done it with Venezuela and their oil. And then, and it goes on from there. But what Daniel was saying to you then is that this is justified, because what came out the briefing. So not only had the Americans already told us that they'd obliterated the nuclear threat, but also that from the briefing, they were told that there was no imminent threat. This has already been leaked by the Pentagon. So we know that there was no imminent threat to the US. That was admitted by the powers that be in the briefing. So when Daniel says, we have the right to do that, actually you don't, because for a preemptive strike, which is what this is, you need that imminent threat, and that was not there. Now, Senator Warner said that there was an imminent threat to Israel, and the only way you can get away with this is if you basically have an equivalence of the US with Israel. And then this goes on to my theory is that Netanyahu has also manipulated this to come about. This is Israel are getting exactly what they want. They are loving it from a military point of view, and the US is obliging. Trump is obliging.
I completely agree with that. And you know, I'm Christian, you're atheist. I have no problem with that. I am not, I don't know, Johnny. I've come to the conclusion of doing this so long in my life, even way prior to YouTube, and trying to be, you know, the hope train and a beacon of hope, and bring people together with different opinions and different thoughts, and learn from each other. You know, translate work and all the work in Ukraine over the last 4 years that will continue. Let me tell you, my positions change now significantly, not on what is in my core values and my core beliefs, but how information is disseminated. I've come to the point where I don't trust anything unless I see it, and it's a real challenge to find lanes that you can trust. So when you cannot trust, for example, the U.S. administration, and that's because they've isolated themselves from those that are supposed to be the checks and balances, whether it's Congress or the judicial system with the Supreme Court. It's hard, even as an American, and I've generations before me, so involved in our military heroes. My grandfather was a World War II Navy hero. It's just difficult for me to go rah. I want to know the plan. I want to know the plan. And when I know the plan, I'm all for you. Yes, our military is incredible. Yes, we are smashing them. But what's the plan?
Yeah, and there's still no legal justification. It's not to say there won't be or there can't be. It's just there isn't. And therefore, absent of legal justification, this is ostensibly illegal and unconstitutional. That's something that was pointed out by Representative Melanie Stansbury, who came out and said, look, what is very clear is that you know, the power to go to war rests squarely with Congress, at least unless it's in like completely extreme circumstances, which this isn't. There was no imminent threat, therefore it should have gone through Congress, and it simply didn't. So yeah, interesting. You know, people pointing out, as AJ Simon here says, that Donald Trump said our president, this is back in 2012, will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and ineffective. Also talked about how you know, how Obama would do this because he wants to get reelected and polls and whatnot. And let me
interject right here. My number one, you know, you have sources that you in your mind you rank, Johnny, that you trust more than others as you push out information to the world, right? They just, and you go, okay, I trust that person more than this person. I trust that information source more than this source. And that's how you filter your information and you present it to your community. For me, my number one guy that I trust completely in Israel, connected to Mossad, just put out the statement 1 minute ago. I can say with great confidence that the truly dramatic events of this war are still ahead of us. This coming weekend and into next week will serve potentially as the tipping point before a massive collapse of the Ayatollah regime begins. Expect major developments, pay close attention to what I say, and pay close attention to what may enter Iran via the ground.
Yeah. So
I trust that that person.
There was talk about Israeli special forces already doing things, and there was talk about the Kurds being armed as well with weaponry. I mean, the thing is, if you are going for regime change, you need movement on the ground and organization on the ground. And the problem the opposition has is they don't have weapons. So unless you provide small arms to an awful lot of people, they're just going to get mowed down like they did the last time that they protested. And Trump actually called on them to protest. They did, and then they got killed because he said, well, we've got your back. But of course, having your back takes maybe a month to get all the stuff ready. And so, you know, it was really dangerous for them. But anyway, well, not there you go.
I'm getting, yeah,
people's
keep
lives.
going logically. In fact, why don't we catch up with the super chats right now, if you don't mind? Let's just kind of change how we flow before we move on, because there's really
that's
some
what I was
good
gonna do.
questions in here. So there's Johnny Nedregard, the Norwegian island dweller. Thank you, Johnny.
John says, will the UK and USA now go behind the scenes to Russia for oil and natural gas as the Middle East goes to war? I don't think the UK will, but Europe is. The EU has been suggesting, I think the energy minister for Norway has suggested that they might need to go back to Russia to get gas, particularly because gas prices have gone insane. And this is why I would say embracing renewables and micro generation and nuclear, so that you can be energy independent rather than dependent on volatility from geopolitics. Yes.
That's a great question, and let me give you, you guys know, we'll try to cover everything as it's all connected. So today, Szijjártó from Hungary, met with Vladimir Putin and was talking about oil supplies, Druzhba pipeline, energy resources for Hungary. He secured the release of 2 Hungarian prisoners of war who were fighting for Ukraine, whatever, all of that. But Putin just coming out after that meeting, there was a 13% trade deficit with Hungary that is now going to be fixed. And Putin has just stated to TASS that he is authorizing the Russian government to consider the issue of shifting current gas supplies away from the European market to alternative markets, trying to put a squeeze on Europe even more. So that's like breaking news right now. Putin to TASS, and you say, okay, Greg, you don't trust TASS. No, I don't trust TASS, but I'm reading it on multiple places here. So there's 2 things that could happen here. You could get some supply or assistance, or you could get a double down, and whatever's coming, we're going to be sending now to India. It's sending to China. India today already talking about formulating plans to increase the shipment of Russian energy supplies. These guys are looking ahead. So, and then the big player on the stage is China, of course.
Yeah, and unfortunately, one of the ramifications for what goes on in Iraq, well, there are several things going on at once, and some of them are good and some of them are bad for Ukraine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for Ukraine, Iran, as a supporter of Russia, is getting tonked, and the production of Shahid drones and whatever is likely to be affected, and Russia loses another one of its important allies. But then on the flip side, gas and oil prices are going sky high, and that just puts loads of money in Putin's pocket to allow him to continue the war. And that is, I think that's more serious. And so
I agree.
And then the US is saying, well, look, we're going to open the Straits of Hormuz, and we'll et cetera, which they might be able to do, but that comes with loads of risks. I mean, it may be that Iran doesn't have the ability to close those straits for a long time, and so 3 or 4 days time, you may see.
Let's just let me just say this, because I know people in the chat are talking. I want to make sure we're accurate. It's 90 to 92% blocked. And when I say blocked 90 to 92%, only. And we're watching, and I'm watching the OSINT, I'm watching the satellites, I'm watching the feeds, and the information coming from governments. Only 8% of normal flow going through. So it is basically closed. But in addition to that, like the largest LNG producer in the world, Qatar, has shut down all production of their LNG. So it doesn't matter if the strait was open or not. They're not pushing gas, and it would take 2 weeks to restart their plant, their operations. I can tell you today, fuel prices in Ukraine are jumping even before the real effect has come officially. And Ukrainian gas stations like Volg and Oko and A&P and others are getting so much heat right now because they have raised the prices already. I remember just during this war paying 45 grivna for a liter. Some of these stations are now 80 grivna for a liter. This is the significant change. Think about that for the Ukrainian military. There was one other thing I was looking for, and I'll find it while you're...
Jesse and Terry here asked a really good question. Sorry if this question was already asked, but does the strait being closed not benefit Trump? Price up, higher prices, and demand for Putin. It's both positive and negative, right? So if you cut supply, then inflation takes place. So energy prices go up, and because everything needs energy, generally it's going to be inflationary, not just for the energy itself, but for other products too. And this is not good for Trump, not good for any country, because it's inflationary. So we will see a knock-on effect on goods and the cost of goods and the price of goods going up. And that is something that Trump should be exceptionally sensitive about, because that's something he campaigned on and he's broadly failed to deliver, or he's been underwhelming on inflation, and the perception is that he's not done a good job on that, and this will exacerbate that problem. Then they can just try and pump more and generate more LNG. But I think they're probably operating at quite a substantial level at the moment, the Americans. So therefore, I think broadly, this is why Trump wants to open the Straits of Hormuz.
Well, listen, we have to be we have to be thankful to God and the planets aligning for you that we have somebody like a Lauren Boebert who was able to explain what inflation is to the world. And if you guys missed that clip, just go to Twitter and type in Boebert explaining inflation. She did. It's beyond excellent. I'm pretty sure my mother-in-law's dog upstairs could have done a better job by barking.
Did you see Marjorie Taylor Greene on the war on Megyn Kelly?
I did. Listen, Megyn Kelly is going nuts right now about this.
Is she?
Yes, sir. In addition, we're having a serious fracture, or we could even move it to the word of implosion here. The campaign promises are not being fulfilled, and we're actually doing the exact opposite. So that's it. Full stop, end of story. Campaign promises are not being fulfilled, and we're actually doing the opposite. And people are waking up to it. Oh, and by the way, the Epstein files are still out there. Yeah. By the way, Kristi Noem is under,
because there are claims that they are being redacted as we speak.
Well, they may be. What I'm saying is that's still there. Kristi Noem under massive questioning on Capitol Hill, and
not going well,
going horrible. Mertz was just with Trump yesterday, and today we learned U.S. to exempt Rosneft there in Germany from sanctions indefinitely. That just came out today. So yeah, that benefits Germany. It benefits Russia a little bit, securing their property there. There was no long-term planning on any of this. That's what we end up at the end of the day, Johnny, how these dominoes affect each other. And I'm just so concerned right now because even Ukrainian news, and I'm talking just straight, pure Ukrainian news, whether it's in their media, their news, their newspapers, not talking about independent analysts and journalists or sources that you guys like to read after. This soldier has this blog. No, just their basic media. It's 80% talking about Iran, because ultimately the effect on Ukraine and the effect on Russia will exponentially increase the longer this war goes.
So Andrew Scully here, and thank you very much on behalf of Greg, says Trump is a flog, is killing Americans due to his ego. This war will go on for years. Now he has his peace prize. He is happy for others to die. Now, I don't know, like I'm sort of at sixes and sevens over whether this war will go on for a long time. And it depends what you mean by war. So if you look at Libya, they went in, decapitated the regime there, got rid of Gaddafi, but then didn't want to do a whole Afghanistan thing and stay in for 20 years. So they kind of did that and then went away. But then that left the country in chaos and civil war. And it still is in complete chaos from what I can gather. Now, if they do that to Iran, it could be that they finish this war relatively quickly, 2, 3, 4 weeks, I don't know. And completely destroy Iran's ability to commit to conventional warfare in a major way. But then if they walk away, then you could have a civil war that takes place within the country between competing factions who are vying for power, and that war could indeed go on for an awful long time unless the US has a plan, which apparently they don't, to stop that from happening. But that would then mean American investment, economic and political investment in Iran for a very long time. So there are so many options.
May I just throw something in here?
Yeah. Anyway, now he has his peace prize. He's happy for others to die. But yeah.
Well,
sorry. Yeah.
Okay. In principle, I agree with you, but in reality, I do not. Yeah. For me, I do not think we can compare Iran to Libya. I do not think we can compare Iran to things that have happened even in the past. Iraq, Afghanistan. I believe we're in a new chapter of warfare. We're in a new chapter of global economics. I believe that due to the way that Donald Trump has led this term, with basically throw out big words, hope something sticks, and then we'll move forward from there. Whether it's, Canada, the 51st state, let's talk about Greenland, EU, I don't like you, NATO, you got to do this. Yeah, Zelensky is P.T. Barnum. He's nothing but a circus showman. Oh, but I like Zelensky. No, the war is sometimes Putin's fault. No, the war is sometimes Zelensky's fault. Okay, just
because they hate each other so much.
Yes. So let me just continue. The reason that this is different, there is a major one. And that is Iran is historically the epicenter of Persia. The population of Iran is 93 million. The population of Libya at that time was 2 million. I just did the look.
Yeah.
You're talking about
and the center of Shiite Islam as well.
That's correct. And Ayatollah Khamenei is the grand poobah, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, of that branch of Islam. And to compare, we're going to leave this nation in fracture. 2 million people trying to figure out what their next leader is, and this is a different story, because this is a nation that is historically key to world events throughout history, and just by sheer population, technology, infrastructure, for me, it's a different story, and that is why we do the millions of Iranians a disservice by not having an end game to this. And I just can't compare that. It's like many times people want to compare, and rightfully so, Russia's war against Chechnya, and we compare that to Russia's war against Ukraine. I get it. It's the same principles. It's the same actions. It's just history repeating itself, but it's different. Ukraine gave up their weapons. Ukraine trusted the security of Western guarantors. Ukraine trusted the security guarantees of the invading nation. Ukraine, let down by everyone in those memorandums or accords or agreements or handshakes, whatever it was, and whatever we saw or did not see. But you're talking about Chechnya, a little small nation. You're talking about Ukraine at the peak, 48 to 50 million people, the barrier, the gateway to Europe, the ports to the Black Sea, you name it, the list goes on and on. They're incomparable. So there's one thing to talk about. Oh, well, Venezuela has a lot of oil too. Mm-hmm. That's a completely different story, guys. Completely different story. You're on the other side of the planet. You're at a nation that has been the axis of evil that goes back to so long. They have vital connections to two of the polarized nations on the planet, one being Russia, one being China. So for me, not having an end game or not recognizing how critical it will be to have an end game, because Iran has been so kind of plugged in different places,
It was really
is a
frustrating
mistake.
to
Yes.
have Trump say with Merz last night that although, Ukraine's up the top of his list, it's not that important because it's so far away. We don't need to be involved in the war because it's that far away. And then he's imploring the world to join him in a war that's even further away than Ukraine geographically. It was honestly insane. Where it's like, well, of course, it's not very important because it's so far away. Why would we be helping Ukraine anyway?
That's on the other side of the ocean. There's an ocean between us.
If you don't help us with Iran, we're gonna put sanctions on you, Spain. What? Well, but anyway, thanks to Dunk on you for support for Greg there.
Thank you, Dunk.
I just want to take the opportunity now to go to Giorgia Meloni.
Let's do it.
Is obviously the leader of Italy. A crisis in international law, says Anton Gerashenko, and a period of chaos. Well, actually, this is Prime Minister Meloni. And a period of chaos in the world are consequences of Russia's war in Ukraine. I really like this coming from her. She's a right-wing leader. She's a bit of a whisperer to Trump, but at the same time understands that Trump, I think, is nuts. Also, might have been a kind of Eurosceptic from that political section in Europe, but has ended up being quite an important leader within Europe. She kind of straddles in a number of different areas. Anyway, she says the Iran conflict worries me, of course, because it would be foolish to believe that events far beyond our borders do not affect us. That is why Italy worked so hard to reach a serious agreement on Iran's nuclear program, particularly at a time when international law is faltering. And we cannot allow the current Iranian regime to have long-range missiles with nuclear warheads. The goal is to prevent the crisis from spreading, and I believe that nothing can improve unless Iran stops its attacks on the Gulf countries, which are completely unjustified, she said in an interview. But the important part for me was this stuff where she talks about how it all comes from Ukraine. That she was big on saying that the issue in Iran is actually just the kind of bubbling over issues with Ukraine. That Ukraine is a problem we really need to solve because and I appreciate that from Giorgia Meloni. But interestingly, you're seeing, and something I've talked about, a big theme of my reporting an analysis recently, Greg, is this divorce of the Europeans, the European continent from the US. Mm-hmm. This idea that Trump has annoyed European leaders to the point and been unreliable as an ally to the point where now they are moving away from dependence on the US for technology, for military industrial complex and military hardware, and we're starting to see some really interesting moves. For example, and I'm sure you heard about this, but Emmanuel Macron, he came in on a helicopter banked, I think, by 2 French jets, right? And this was just an absolute moment that hasn't been reported on enough in our mainstream media in UK and in probably the United States. But in Europe, in France and Germany, I think they had serious coverage of this, where he talked in front of a massive nuclear submarine. UK, Germany, and France will produce long-range missiles together in a new partnership, was one of the many things he says. But he was basically saying France is the only European country which isn't a complete underling of the American empire. He didn't say this is Aaron Bastani. The kind of autonomy is unthinkable for Britain. So this idea that France is really standing up. I've ordered that we increase the number of nuclear warheads in our arsenal. We will no longer communicate on the figures regarding our nuclear arsenal. But he's basically saying, we are going to react to China and their nukes. We are going to react to the unreliability of the United States. And we are going to be the provider of a kind of nuclear umbrella of some sort for Europe. If we use our nuclear arsenal, no country, however powerful, could remain immune. One of our submarines has the strike power equivalent to all the firepower the bombs launched on Europe, 1,000 times the power of the first atomic bomb. He's saying all these things. The French generals and politicians there, they got together and they're all singing the Marseillaise, the French national anthem. You know, as you can see here, this was a really big moment. The Marseillaise in front of France's nuclear submarine yesterday. Unlike Britain, France and the EU has 100% control of its nuclear force de frappe, and isn't operationally dependent on the US like the UK is for its Trident and infrastructure. That's real sovereignty in today's world, says another, and so on and so forth. So,
Mr. Johnny Pierce, And within 24 hours of that, Poland, Noraki, and also Donald Tusk came out and said it's time for us to start considering how to develop our own nuclear game plan, nuclear plan of action for the future, for our own sovereignty and protection, because the world is changing. So take it back to the START treaty not being re-signed between Russia and the United States. And I'm not saying it's connected, but since then, the war has broke out in Iran. Everybody has now talking nuclear, 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 nuclear. And it's really interesting. Nuclear nations are not attacked.
No, the war in Ukraine
you know what I'm
saying? It's
correct
that nukes work, right? So what's happened is that European nations are now saying that they are willing to work with France to carry French nuclear weapons in a way that they would previously be housing American weapons. This map shows countries that Macron revealed on that day are in talks with the French to host their weapons. This is part of the European strategy to become more independent from the US. This is a really serious moment in I think European and global history.
Somebody in the chat, this is 5 minutes ago, it went by very fast, and they said that Putin will actually take credit for this oil crisis, and kind of made it as a joke. Just being reported now in his interview with Zarubin, he actually made that statement where when you try to blink out the Russian supply and the Russian piece of the global energy requirements, you're now going to experience what you're seeing. And it's not only going to be because of the war in Iran. It's like somebody in the chat just made that statement, and then boom, here it is. So he's actually saying, free us up so that we can help this world. It's crazy what we're witnessing, which is a benefit to them. It's a benefit to the coffers.
Yeah, just going back to the idea of France, I think it's really interesting. Emmanuel Macron, he finishes his tenure in 27. I don't know if he can get voted in again, or he's traditionally not been very popular. Presidents never are in France. And there's the rise of the far right. Marine Le Pen with Rassemblement National, the right-wing populist party there, was probably odds-on favorite to become the next president, but she now cannot run because she's been done for fraud. And so one wonders, I mean, Emmanuel Macron seems to be coming into his own big time at the moment, and he's like doing all this stuff, which I'm looking at thinking that's big and bold and strong. And he's a real pro-European leader. He's a pro-EU leader that wants to have France at the center of the EU, and France kind of leading from the front with the military-industrial complex, the nuclear capabilities. I think it's very, very clever, but it's also very important for Europe to do this, as they are distancing themselves very meaningfully from dependence on the United States. This really is an inflection point in European history. But yeah, there you go. I just think that that is, and we're starting to see this in the UK as well. So UK and France have been meeting. Here's Luke Pollard, one of our ministers, defense ministers, saying the UK and France have had a close defense partnership. We're all co-leading the coalition that are willing to support Ukraine, deepening our defense cooperation at the Lancaster House Treaty refresh. Good to speak to my French counterpart about joint work in Paris today. So they are getting much closer together, the British and the French. And we've had Keir Starmer saying we've done a new deal with the European Union, which means we are more closely aligned to them when it comes to agriculture and food. That sounds more technical, but it translates to cheaper foods at the supermarkets because blah, 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 blah. So the British and the Europeans are getting closer as a result of the United States and Trump. The Europeans are getting closer to each other as a result of the United States and Trump. And you are getting a shift in power, possibly, where the Europeans are saying we need to rehome, we need to reshore some of that power from the United States, economic, technological, and things like AI and stuff. And Anthropic could be convinced to come over to Europe as an AI company, but Mistral are getting stronger and stronger, French AI company. The UK, and there's loads of stuff going on in the UK with regard to AI at the moment. There's really good, loads of announcements have probably gone under the radar for most people. Really big technical potential for European tech and military firms, and obviously the nuclear thing, that I just think that you're seeing the United States lose some of its power in the world, and it's starting to happen, and the EU or Europe standing up more and more, which is what the Americans asked for. But I don't think they realized that it was going to hurt them, because they won't be buying American kit, they'll be buying European kit, so on and so forth.
Let me show you what's coming out from Chris Van Hollen.
I showed a video of him earlier. I think I showed this video. I did a whole
You did?
No, I did a whole video on reactions to the briefing, but his one was a good one. His one was typical of all of them, actually. I'll add that to the stage, and just remove mine. Hang on.
There you go.
Decided to
hang on. You can't see it at the moment, can you?
No.
I need to add to the stage. Why is that?
And so
here we go.
Here we are, doing what Prime Minister Netanyahu
Back
said
it up.
he wanted
You
to
missed
do
the first part
for
of
40
it.
years, which we do know from Secretary Rubio that Netanyahu decided to strike Iran.
100%.
And so here we are, doing what Prime Minister Netanyahu said he wanted to do for 40 years, which was to attack Iran. It's just Netanyahu had not found a president stupid enough to drag the United States into that war before. And now Donald Trump has done it, and they don't have a clue as to what the end game is.
And that was really typical of all of the senators and representatives who came out of that meeting and said, there's no clue, there's no plan,
And
all these different ideas.
And a reminder for everyone watching, that is after they were privy to details that we are not privy to. They come out and say, okay, well, this is a problem.
Yeah, none of them were happy.
No. And now we're getting multiple confirmations now on what I said earlier, 15 minutes ago. Putin 100% is saying Russia considering stopping all gas flow to European markets right now rather than next month, because we are open to redirecting supplies to more promising and needy markets.
Yeah. And just the final thing I was going to say on my bit about Europeans standing up. This is just a random bit of news talking about AI. Germany launched a major AI project in February to cut reliance on US high-performance computing suppliers. Deutsche Telekom built one of Europe's largest industrial AI cloud platforms in a repurposed Munich data center in just 6 months, equipping it with nearly 10,000 NVIDIA Blackwell GPUs. This provides computing power for simultaneous AI assistant use by all 450 million EU citizens. CEO Tim Hertges called it a foundation for innovation, industry, startups, government, and European tech sovereignty, aiming to keep Germany and the EU competitive with the US and China. That sort of thing is going on in the UK to some degree. It's happening in Germany. I mean, it's just really interesting to see this move of Europe to become more independent from the United States. So I think, I'm fascinated by this idea that Trump wanted, and it's not just Trump, this is the people within the administration and people ideologically for some time have wanted Europe to spend more on defense, right? As a percentage of GDP to qualify for NATO, you need to spend more, right? And then when the EU says, okay, we're going to spend more, but if we're going to spend all this money, we want to make sure that this money is spent on European industry, not American industry, because obviously our tax dollars need to be multiplied within our own industrial bases and economies. And then the US said, hey, you can't do that. But then we say, well, you just told us to do that and spend more money. Yeah, but you have to spend that money on us. It has to come to the United States. We're like, no, it doesn't. Yes, it does. Okay, well, screw you. And so actually what's happened is, I think, the desire for Europe to be more independent means that the US will have less say in what Europe does from a foreign policy point of view, and will have less say with what Europe does with regard to procuring military equipment. And while then will have less say what Europe does when it comes to AI tech, as they divest themselves or they move away from American dependence. And none of this is good for the US in the long run. So I think they've shot themselves.
Let me ask you a question then, because you are a UK citizen. You were a part of the EU. You then had Brexit, and I remember you and I discussing Brexit there in the car riding around Ukraine. You were teaching me about it. But Do you personally see this happening, this scenario? And what scenario, as a citizen of the UK and a geopolitical tippling expert, what's best for this?
So by this, I presume you mean the UK rejoining the EU. So,
no, I'm talking about the relations between Europe, and I'm putting in UK because you kept saying EU, but Europe, UK, and the United States.
So this is really important because the UK is in a really difficult position because the US. So when we came out of the EU with regard to Brexit, one of the promises was people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage said, we're going to do these amazing trade deals with everyone. We're going to do this amazing trade deal with the United States, right? And this was like, okay, we're out of the EU. We can somehow do better trade deals with than the biggest trade bloc in the world. That's weird. But anyway, the idea that the sunny uplands of Brexit would be us relying on individual trade deals with the rest of the world. But the reality is we're now in a less strong position, a weaker position, because we're not in the biggest trade bloc in the world, and we have to negotiate trade deals on the basis of a weaker position, which means that prima facie that's not really going to happen. But then the US has turned around and essentially started a trade war with everyone in the world. So our promise of being able to mitigate against being out of the EU economically, we've been slapped in the face by the United States. So then necessarily Starmer's had to go back to the EU because we're being tariff attacked by Trump. Everyone else is putting up trade barriers because protectionism from the US means that protectionism will happen all around the world as everyone then puts down their shutters to try and protect their own, and the UK is now left on its own. Right. And I don't care whether you're a leaver or Remainer, just economically, we are in a really vulnerable position. And so we have a choice. Do we get closer to the United States? Well, Trump is being a douchebag and is pushing us away. So, and also geographically, we have to sell our goods to Europe. Well, we're likely to sell our goods much closer to home than further away. So therefore, we need to get closer to the EU. What does that look like? A customs union? I won't go into all these things, but it could look like a customs union or the single market or full-on rejoining, right? But either way, UK is in a very vulnerable position. So Starmer is doing a clever thing at the moment, which is getting closer on defense as a way into getting closer to the EU more generally, and then economic things like agriculture and stuff like that. Anyway, so the question for the UK is slightly different from the EU. The EU is a big trade bloc, which means that people like Macron can say things about Trump and have a protection, and Sanchez. So Sanchez can come out and say things that Starmer can't. Right, so Starmer would probably love to go screw Trump. He's being a bit of a douchebag. We really don't support Iran, but our integration in the UK with the US in terms of defense is much more than Spain. Right, we've got that special relationship. We do Five Eyes, intelligence sharing, all sorts of stuff. Spain less so, but also Sanchez can kind of say stuff about Trump and then have the protection of the EU. And that's what's happened. So now we've had Macron and Merz come out and publicly defend, and the EU from its central entity has come out and publicly defended Sanchez against Trump. We can't do that in the UK so easily. So there is this interesting dynamic going on with all of them. But I think you will see the EU want to just be protectionists themselves, protect their own industry, and you might even see, either formal or informal boycotting of American stuff, and then America will react to that by trying to put tariffs on European stuff, and you will just get the shutters pulled down and protectionism go up, and then free trade go out the window.
Thank you. I understand. Some of you guys may be watching, and you'll see news come across because I have confirmed it now. It's just kind of coming out that there's going to be a vote, a procedural vote in Congress and the Senate to limit the War
Powers Act
of Trump. Is not going to happen. So, I mean, the vote's going to happen, but even if it went through the whole procedure, the vote passed, and then it goes to the House and it passes, Trump will then veto it, and they would not have a 2/3. So don't waste your time.
They've admitted that. I think it was maybe Senator Warner that was talking about that, or one of them saying it might have been Chris Murphy actually saying we're going to do this, but I don't think it'll get through. Like, for the reasons you're saying.
Think about this, and this comes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the live. And I told you guys that even mainstream media inside Ukraine is talking about Iran. Every analyst right now talking about Iran. Zelensky himself talking about Iran. He's saying, and he just put out a statement just minutes ago. I'm once again reminding everyone that Ukraine stands prepared to assist with the shaheeds, with the geraniums. We're here to protect. We're here to do our part as a member of the free world. And of course, he's getting crickets on that. But regardless, even President Zelensky talking about it. And you know, today, I think Putin signed the edict or the law once again, increasing the level of Russian military numbers. I don't know how much it went up, but you know, there are so many things happening behind the scenes. And if you guys, have you noticed that overall, over the last 5 days, it's been pretty quiet in regard to large-scale airstrikes against Ukraine. Ukraine has been the one doing the most damage against Russia, smashing targets, smashing targets. And you know what's other than us, there's nobody talking about those successes. So we need to see that there are great successes for Ukraine right now. They have taken back land, and I know that that line moves back and forth. We talk about it all the time, but a lot of positives happening for Ukraine right now when the world and even Ukraine is looking down in the Persian Gulf. Now, I can tell you the chatter is out there. I've been telling you guys on my update yesterday, the chatter's out there. Everything's loaded. Ukraine is expecting a large-scale attack. Zelensky's already warned that now that we're moving into springtime, they're going to go after our water supplies. I've told you guys that I've experienced Mykolaiv, where the water system was completely destroyed and only yellow water came out of the sinks for years. And you, of course, you could not drink it. It was suitable only for, you know, the restroom. People, you couldn't even shower in it. So they can strike these places. So this is what we need to be watching for. Is Russia building up for some big attack? I don't know.
What frustrates me,
it's just, we need to make sure this story stays, you know, out and on the front, because I mean, I'm even reading European sources today. It was, it might've been a guy out of the Netherlands. I can't remember, some parliamentarian, Netherlands, Belgium, I don't know, somewhere. But I mean, he's got authority and power. He says, listen, guys, we have a war in Ukraine that affects Europe. And all we're doing is talking about Iran right now. Yeah. And rightfully so, we need to talk about Iran. Yeah. But we have a war here. So
what frustrates me is that the US forces have struck or sunk more than 20 Iranian regime ships, according to CENTCOM, with the Soleimani class warship, this catamaran, now added to the list. And when I was reporting on the first airstrikes by the US and Israel, there was one video where 21 Tomahawk missiles just went overhead. And you look at that and you think, Ukraine could have had them. Do you know what I mean? Like, okay, there's a focus on Iran from the US point of view, but like, I look at the Iranian stuff getting blown up and think that could have been Russian stuff.
Okay,
it's just the scale of if they'd just been given,
brother, we would wipe out Russia in a New York minute.
I've said that from the moment, like, if Ukraine has kept the Russian forces pinned as they have, in the way that they have, and treated them in the way they have, their conventional land forces and to some degree their air and naval forces, then NATO would make mincemeat out of Russia.
It is not hopium, guys. It's not hopium. All you have to do is look at what Ukraine has done and stood for now into the 5th year. With what we have, if what we had done, what we have done in 4 days to Iran, we did to strategic targets inside Russia, this war would be over. Yeah. Now, here's
it's only the nuclear.
It's only the nuclear deterrence, exactly, and that cannot be taken off the table. Okay, of course. So the other thing that plays into this is you have the American senators and congressmen and you know, looking at it from all angles. President Trump's own circle of influence, his cabinet, you know, Marco Rubio specifically, Netanyahu's war, Israel's war, we're coming to the aid. Netanyahu. That will never happen for Zelensky. Never. Because it's just that relationship is unfortunately
Israel just holds an awful lot of sway over American politicians and American
100%. And then you can go down the holes of money into political action committees and down the deep hole. We can go down the deep hole way deep. But the reality is, a lot of Israeli money all through the United States. Unfortunately, and please, unless it's changed, I'm not there. Unless it's changed, Vladimir Putin's picture is still hanging in the West Wing. So you have to remember that as well. And
that's so depressing, isn't it? It's so depressing. That tells you
that's why the differences are there. That's why the differences are there. Because the reality is, it would already be over. If we pushed into the Black Sea what we have in the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean, it'd be over.
I was talking this morning because Novorossiysk has been hit. It was hit on consecutive nights, and there was talk about 5. And there's a little bit more detail actually about some of that I haven't gone through with my audience. Some more detail about some of the ships that were damaged. But you had those 5 warships damage, a Panzer S2 air defense system. You had the radar for an S300. You had a bunch of oil and port infrastructure. Now, as you continually degrade air defenses, then it becomes easier and easier, and it's like a snowball effect. And what I sometimes miss is Ukraine hitting things on consecutive nights, and obviously there are difficulties here, but it requires them having enough drones of different varieties. But I'd love to see Novorossiysk hit on repeated nights so that the Black Sea Fleet is just wiped out. Like if you just had another couple hundred drones tonight, another couple hundred tomorrow, but obviously that's wishful thinking. But I'd hope that they are getting production up to a degree where they can start to think about that. Thierry on my thread though said and I did say this, like the Black Sea Fleet isn't actually functionally that useful. It would be more of a PR disaster for Russia, but actually it hasn't been firing cruise missiles this year really. And so you'd really want to be using those 200 drones a night to take out entire refineries and oil depots than the Black Sea Fleet. But still there'll be a PR win of having those ships on fire.
I'm gonna give my little 2 cents here. I think right now is actually a reprieve for Russia, and they are using this.
What, Iran?
No, for Russia.
As in, no, is Iran a reprieve?
Absolutely, absolutely. Right, yeah. Meaning the attention is deflected.
Yeah.
And they are realizing the weaker position they're in, and they're scrambling right now to take this window of opportunity that's not a ceasefire. It's not even talk. I mean, right now we're looking at the potential talks that were going to happen now being canceled because of the war in Iran extending. They were talking about, we'll just choose a new location. But now we're talking about today, I was reading that it may even be canceled. We'll have to just wait and see. But now we see Russia talking about, it's Ukraine that struck our tanker there in the Mediterranean. So we're going to get them for that. And then today in Putin's address, in his private conversation with Zarubin on Kremlin.ru, Kremlin.ru, he was just talking about, we have absolute evidence that Ukraine is going to blow up the Blue Stream, the Turkish Stream in the Black Sea. Ukraine is getting ready to blow it up. Okay, all this is diversionary tactics, and
this is as in what you're saying here. So this is the idea, Blue Stream pipelines.
Yes, absolutely. So they're taking this to get a breather, and Ukraine hitting hard during this. So we need to see what the end result will be, but everything shows you that they're significantly struggling, and that's why some of the beneficial things that can come from this war being extended in Iran, and I do call it a war. Anybody that doesn't call this a war needs their brain examined, their head examined. It's a war, not a special military operation. And I know we haven't declared war and all the technicalities, but my goodness, if this is not a war, I'd hate to see what a war is. Okay, so just having a little fun there, but they're using this to manipulate relationships, talk behind the scenes. Okay, well, let's cut off EU gas early. Ukraine's going to blow up the blue stream. What else can we do? Let's facilitate ourselves for the next month, for going into the spring and the summer. Let's talk to India again. Let's make sure we're straight with China. These are the kind of things that Russia masterfully will try and take advantage of. So we need to keep our eye on it.
Yeah. Just to return to some
let's do it.
Dunk on you. Thank you very much. I did show these earlier.
It's a mess. 100% Dunk, and thank you. I know you were working today, but you hopped in early moderating. Appreciate you and those 10 gifted memberships also.
John says 90 million people in Iran, different religions, and so it will be a sectarian religious homeland for each religion. I mean, I don't know, the proportion of Shiites is obviously going to be pretty damn significant, but yeah, I mean, it's just a hotbed of you know, different groups there.
Great thought there.
No plan. Christine, and thank you for that, John. Christine McDonald for you says, yep, already soda, chips, tea, sleeping bag, and nightlight. Right, Greg, go for it. Now Russians are getting a taste of their shahids in Dubai. Now you know what you have done to Ukraine over 4 years. So that's very kind, Christine. But yeah, so we heard today, we saw a video of a Russian handling a bit of a Garand 2 with Russian writing on saying Garand 2 drone in Dubai. And it's like, yep, that's your drones. And I find this interesting because that means those are being produced by Russia for Iran, which then makes me think that Iran probably don't have a depth of storage of those that they might have if they're using Russian ones. So the idea that Iran can last, you know, forever and a day, I think is possibly overdoing it. I think Ukraine...
Let me throw this out there once again. I'm just going to stick with my narrative. And thank you, Christine McDonald. Appreciate you so much and your support. I just stand by what I've kind of been saying the last 10 minutes. It is to Russia's benefit in a multiplicity of ways, whether economically, breather, attention, diversion, that this war in Iran goes on. And I remind you, they have the Caspian Sea for transport. So I wouldn't be surprised at all that some kit is being sent down Iran's way. Keep shooting it, boys. Keep shooting it, boys. You're helping me out in the long run. I don't know, but there's you know, you have to think this way because they're still strategical partners with the enemy of the West. I want to go back and answer the question with the 90 million, 95% Shia Muslim in Iran, 5%. Well, let's call it even. Let's skew it 5 more percent. Let's go 90% Shia Muslim and 10% Sunni. 0.015% Christian.
Yeah.
And 0.15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting comment here from
It's Shia. It's Shia Islam.
Viggo Holmson saying CIA arming the Kurds and other minorities to foment civil war in Iran. Flashbacks to the Donbass in 2014. This can all go horribly wrong.
Okay. Leave that comment up there. I'm just getting information out from my Israeli sources I trust completely. And they're talking about the same thing, that right now Kurds are being armed, militia groups are being organized, backed to begin ground invasions from that regional area. And Iran has already replied, we see what you're doing, and we remind you we have a 1 million man standing army. So this stuff is happening right now. Very good comment there.
F Oink, very generous for you. Good to hear from you.
Thank you. He's one of my moderators there in Hungary. Speaking of Hungary, let me ask you a question, JP. Does Orban get reelected?
So, okay, let me find what I had on Hungary prepared for this moment, because I like to be prepared.
I know you do. I do the same. I've been preparing all morning for this.
Here it is. So, okay, let's go. Let's share that one. So here is Hungary. So insiders say Hungary's Russian-backed Viktor Orban regime is planning a coup. That was in the Daily Telegraph the other day. So there are rumors that a coup could be being planned. This would be very interesting because it's obviously an EU country. They'd pretty much get kicked out of the EU for that, but there's no mechanism to kick countries out of the EU. But I think de facto they would be, or funding would be just completely stopped. And Hungary would have no voting rights. I think Article 7, of the EU would be invoked. So that that could be on the cards, could be like scaremongering.
One question, and I remind you today that Sijarto went and met personally with Putin, okay? And there may have been some election discussions. There may have been. In addition to
Midget meets without going Hungarian foreign minister.
In addition to that, I remind you guys, it was only 2, maybe 3 weeks ago max, where Marco Rubio went to Hungary, talked about how great Orban was, and then Trump backed him up again, saying that Orban's one of the greatest leaders on the planet, and I give him my full endorsement. He must be reelected. So you've got Trump with his finger in it. You've got Putin with his finger in it. Anything could happen.
Yes. And, F. Oink there from Hungary, be interested to see what you think. But we do hear that the several Hungarian opposition parties, so it's really a 2-horse race in Hungary, where you've got now a pretty considerable margin between Tisza, the opposition party under Peter Magyar, and then the Viktor Orbán party, Fidesz. The rest of them are kind of sub 5%. I don't know if there's a 5% minimum votes needed for electing parliamentarians in Hungary, but that's often the case. But anyway, several Hungarian opposition parties have withdrawn from the April elections to avoid splitting the vote and boost Magyar's Tisza party, which is currently leading Orbán's Fidesz in the polls, according to Financial Times. That's significant. I was wondering whether that would happen. Now, I think, that's a duchy living in Orbanistan. That is fascinating, because I think, all things remaining equal, Peter Magyar and Tisza would romp into a big victory. The question is, how much will Orban cheat? How much will the EU have a say in observing and making sure things happen properly? I don't know. I would imagine Orban's going to try and hold on to power for as long as he can. Of
course.
So yeah, I mean, I'd like to think he would get beaten, but there's undoubtedly going to be either like explicit or kind of implicit rigging.
Well, I just asked Gemini, Google, and I asked just a simple question. I said, as of today, March the 4th, 2026, what are the possibilities or chances of Viktor Orban being reelected to his position? And today's answer by Gemini is, from everything we can analyze, we see that the race has now essentially become a dead heat between Orban and Magyar. It's already happening. So it will, because it wasn't a dead heat. Magyar was clicking ahead very nicely. So
well over 10% difference.
April 12th, 10%. So elections are a month and 5 weeks from now, April 12th. So we'll see. Dude, the world in which we're living in right now, April 12th, 2026, may as well be June 1st, 3812, because so much can happen.
Yep. F. Oink, so gifting an awful lot of memberships to you.
Yeah, thank you, Oink.
Armed conflict is a continuation of politics by other means. I don't trust the US government politics by the extension of their not war. So that's F. Oink. Thank you very much. Jason Terry again. Does Trump want the Strait blocked equals prices up?
Well,
I don't think he does.
Let me just answer. All we can do, we cannot get inside Trump's mind, and believe me, you do not want to get inside Trump's mind. But we know what he tweeted, and that is the Americans would start offering insurance to ships that want to pass, and some kind of plan could be worked out. So we have to infer from that he wants those ships moving. Listen, I would say at some point, he has to recognize the damage being done here globally the longer this goes. But then as I was getting ready to say it, I have to come back. I don't think he cares. He only thinks about himself. And you can call it whatever you want, but it's definitely not America first. It's not making America great again. It's not any of those things. And
Well, as Andrew Scully says, thanks to Trump, another depression is coming. So you could, I mean, everything he's doing at the moment is attempting to put the world into economic reverse. Tariffs, trade wars, centralized price structuring that he's trying to do. He's almost like he just wants to be a dictator, whether that's like a command economy that he controls. He certainly is not a fan of free market economics. And
well, let me just say this as an American. When you are overruled by the Supreme Court of the United States, and then you flip that narrative to call it a win, and then you throw ill talk onto the robes of the highest judicial court in the land because you did not like their opinion, you have a serious problem.
But the problem is, Greg, is that like 10 years ago, that would have been, Fox would have ran that for like 3 weeks if that had been, say, Obama. But now that's forgotten about.
Sir, okay.
Trump was hideous to the treatment of the Supreme Court by Trump publicly with his rhetoric was hideous. And yet now we're at war in Iran and everyone's forgotten that.
So who's going to call him out? Greg Gutfeld? He's an idiot.
Yeah, no one. No one, and
Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity is gone. He sipped the Kool-Aid.
So you're having people now resign from CBS because CBS is owned by Paramount. Hang on, one thing, and you've got CNN is probably going to be owned by Paramount as well because he's going to give permission for that merger to take place. So he's controlling more and more media outlets.
Stop it. Listen, forget Fox News. You listen to me right here. 10 years ago, it was Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio screaming that he was a narcissistic, evil human being that could not be trusted with leadership, that has no right to be in any elected office. He is the devil incarnate. And I am specifically calling out Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, and Lindsey Warmonger Graham. And now all they do is walk around with Charmin toilet paper to make sure his rear end is cleaned up and enough mouthwash that they can lick his boots with fresh breath. So forget media. It's in our own political society. And I am a conservative, Christian, historically Republican, Reaganite. Everybody can yell at me all you want, whatever. That was where I am. And I can see it. It's absolute evil what we're witnessing. Evil. So that's our own elected or appointed officials, Senate confirmed in this administration, not a hired propagandist on any news platform.
So what's, I guess, good news for opponents to Donald Trump is looking at the lay of the land politically in the United States. So you've already mentioned the Texas primary. So remember, this is an election for the senator. This is who's going to represent the Democrats and the Republicans. But the Democrat early vote way outshone the Republican vote for the primary, which suggests that there's a mobilized voter, there's a mobilized electorate that is anti-Trump that could be very significant come November. And I just want to show you this. Harry Enton, the very excitable CNN poll analysis, says the word last night for Democrats in Texas, tremendous. So James Tallarico did win the primary, but there was a lot of people voting for both and fewer people voting for the Republicans. So highest turnout ever for a Texas Democrat Senate primary, more than 2 times, more than double the average this century, more votes cast in a midterm Texas Democrat primary than the GOP for the first time since 2002. And the GOP side, meanwhile, is a dumpster fire. So you've got Ken Paxton, who I don't know if he got voted in or whether it is John Cornyn, who is the more of the moderate Republican. But if it's Ken Paxton, then he's a total MAGA that is actually not very popular. He got his wife divorced him for biblical reasons, as in he had an affair. He's pretty controversial, and you might end up having James Tallarico winning a Senate seat in bloody Texas, which is quite incredible. The point being that there are movements happening. Like, people aren't happy in the United States. Yeah, some of the MAGA base will still be all right, but generally speaking, highly interesting times politically. And things like looking at the primaries in Texas, but you also had some other votes that took place in terms of Arkansas. Had some state, I think the Supreme Court in Arkansas, or some state seats in Arkansas, also flipped from Republican to Democrat. So these are really interesting stats coming out. Anyway, I just thought that was worth pointing out. And by the way, Greg, so
yes, sir.
Here, G. Delavable, so I think says, you guys, JP and Greg, should be on mainstream media. You really say the truth about geopolitics. All I can say is, please apply skeptical caveats, because we are both kind of autodidacts, meaning kind of we taught ourselves. I don't have a degree in geopolitics, and I don't think Greg does either.
No,
but I guess many geopolitical analysts are people that just do observe that which is going on around the world, and hopefully you've got enough now so you can put cogent thoughts together. So I really do appreciate you guys thinking that.
Yeah, I was degree majoring in history, and then for me, I can't believe it's been this long, but 32 years working around the world in 38 nations. And fortunately for me, and I say fortunately, I've spent over 4 years of my life in Ukraine. I love it. And you get to know the culture. I spent a lot of time in Russia, and I speak the language. I can read the media, and I understand the culture. I've spent lots of times in the Middle East, Israel, Pakistan, Dubai, you name it, all over Africa, Far East, Asia, lots of time, Philippines, the list goes on and on. So it's helped develop who I am today, and the perspective I have. And for me, in all of that global experience, time away from my family, I would leave for a month at a time on a mission or a job, or going to do something. 6 weeks gone here, 6 weeks gone there. I've got a wonderful family, but I've learned one thing from spending all that time in all these different cultures, and that is people are people, and people are important, and we need to focus on what is right and come together for what is just, and eliminate the things that divide us, and not let it just be talking points that get destroyed. But it's truth and reality. Like, I mean, JP, I think you and I are great examples. I mean, I'd fight for you in a heartbeat, buddy. And I know you would do the same.
Yeah, likewise, except I'd be crawling towards the enemy with a gun in hand, or maybe just shaking a very angry fist. But I wouldn't be running. That's for sure.
No, that's for sure.
For those who don't know, but in Greg's audience, I had multiple sclerosis, so I literally can't run. I think I last ran in about 2019, but there you go. So where were we? Greg, Stephen Bendau. There's an immediate threat to Trump from the Epstein files, so he just has to wag the dog. I mean, this is the classic wag the dog film. You start a war to escape having to deal with difficult issues back at home. So there it is.
Which also becomes a reason to extend. And then in addition to that, you're looking ahead to the midterm elections, and you to not see connections. And you do not have to have one conspiracy theory bone in your body, but just have common sense and look at what's unfolding. You say, it's just too many coincidences here not to be connected. Yeah. I mean, listen, here's what disgusts me most, and we're focused on Iran and Israel and Ukraine and Russia and U.S. today. I am so disgusted over the 6, 7, 8 times that this person that's been elected as the president of the United States walks by the media on the way to the chopper or to Air Force One and says, listen, Epstein's over. We don't need to talk about it. I've been completely exonerated. I've been 100% exonerated. And for me, that makes my blood boil. Let me tell you this. We had a dinner Monday night, and we invited our neighbors over, and our neighbors are 90 and 89. 90 and 89. Conservatives, lot of history, remember everything, from the 50s all the way. This one gentleman graduated from high school in 1953. So, I mean, hello, it's the age, rare treasure to talk to people like this. And they are just disgusted at what they've historically watched happen to the United States. And they're conservatives. And they just says, I don't even know what country I'm living in anymore. And these are 90 and 89-year-old respectively, husband and wife, love America, that traditional 50s, 60s, 70s, growing up, living their lives. And said,
I met a lovely elderly couple on holiday this year, and they were American. They were probably in their late 70s, something like that. And she had, I think, helped on the Reagan campaign. So these are old school Republicans. He was a veteran, then got into agriculture. And I think they lived up maybe sort of Minnesota, Michigan, somewhere Pennsylvania, that kind of way. And they were a rarity that I see these days of like old school conservatives. Not the old school conservatives aren't lovely, but really lovely people with their heads switched on, understood politics, and they found Trump absolutely horrific, but from a position of old school Republicans, and I found that quite refreshing, because so often we see a cult of personality which is just doubling down on support for Trump just because he's my guy type thing. He's got my team's shirt on, if you like.
I'll tell you, and there's a lot of good people out there, and it's just, this is the world we live in. Somebody in my chat had just said, yeah, you can tell a lot, and I'd like to make sure I get credit for it, but it's going by quickly. I'm sorry. Somebody just stated, it went by, that yes, Michelle Hernandez, when Trump was talking about the 4 soldiers killed in Iran, he instantly moved into talking about drapes, and that shows, yeah, that shows you.
And he was asked on the way back from the helicopter by a reporter. Great opportunity for PR. He was asked by a reporter, what can you tell us about the people who had died? And he ignored them and carried on walking. And like, that's your time where you turn around and say something. It can be tried,
but it doesn't matter. You say anything that's conciliatory and grateful. That's what you do as a leader. And somebody just asked, Meezer 8076, did Trump call Zelensky a clown? As far as I'm concerned, he's the one putting on Total Circus in the Oval Office. He referred to him 2 days ago as P.T. Barnum, who is I did a video on it. You can go back and watch it. P.T. Barnum, for those of you outside the United States, was
The Greatest Showman, the film
The Greatest Showman, a classical guy that could manipulate, get money out of anybody by selling them a bag of goods. And he's the one that made the statement, a sucker is born every minute. So that's who.
So we've got some more super chats. The Europeans are not going to follow any more US wars that don't have legality and a clear goal. We are not falling into this pit again, says stupidity in essence. I'm a little bit disappointed in Friedrich Merz, so the E3 came out. So E3 seems to be this thing now. France, Germany, and the UK, they came out sort of singing off the same song sheet. Canada also kind of supported Trump without committing to aiding, but I don't know if they've kind of trying to row it back a little bit at the moment, because Carney, I think, was a bit too supportive. But Merz seemed to have, there doesn't seem to be enough European coordination. But then Merz, I think, is now coming back on side and trying to defend Sanchez and Starmer in light of criticisms from Trump. But generally speaking, I think the Europeans are going to be very wary of supporting Trump and the war. And I think it's a case of doing it defensively only, which seems to be the get out of jail free card there. Doncon News says, love Ukraine, sir. Please keep doing exactly as you are. You're doing a bang up job. So
awesome.
That's very kind. I think that's to me as well.
Yeah, that's to you. Dunk's taking care of you.
Thanks,
Dunk. Listen, you talking
bang
about
up job.
That's exactly right. He is a. I thought he was older than he was. He's on my mod team. He's a great guy, and he's big time computer guy. So he's showing his smarts there. Calling him at the bang up job. Now he's not as went as far as I will and call you the dog's bollocks. But that's hey.
I wouldn't expect him.
No, I'm not even talking about any of the cockwomble actions that we are seeing in the world right now.
Oh goodness me!
I'm learning from you and all of your guys. I'll put a video up, and then one of your ATP guys will put a comment in there, and they'll say, "Greg, just go ahead and call him a cockwomble."
No, please don't. Gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics membership. Thank you very much. Gen Consensus says Iran has sold tens of thousands of drones and exported drone engines and components to Russia, and also sold about 1,000 ballistic missiles for attacks on Ukrainian civilians. I think Jen, from another comment, basically sounds like, Jen, you're supportive of strikes on Iran. So here's another one. Iran has been arming terrorists and attacking their neighbors for decades. Trump did not unleash anything. Is it Trump's fault that Iran are terrorists? Iran has been attacking Saudi and UAE for years. And I agree with all of that stuff.
Completely.
And they're bad guys, but it's about how you go about doing these things. And if you don't have legal basis for what you're doing, then again, it is basically what Russia has done.
And for me, I'm 100% all in on this. My problem is, for me, having the proper leadership, the mid game and the end game. So we did the initial strikes. We've taken out Ayatollah Khamenei. We have moved into this mid game bombing campaign to eliminate their military capabilities. But what happens? How do you close it? How do you end it? What happens next? What dominoes affect other dominoes, and specifically Russia, Ukraine? And I always come back to this entire, it's all connected 100%.
Yes. And this is I think this is worthy of a bit of discussion. I've Gone Fishing 482 says, irks me that it took a reckless fool like Trump to finally confront genocidal dictators like Maduro and the Ayatollah. How long did the rest of the world stand idly by while Venezuelans and Iranians were killed and oppressed? So the problem here is that whenever I talk about analogies, I talk about local neighborhoods and people, doing wrong, and then maybe vigilantes coming along, and then the police coming along, and the rule of law, and we should all adhere to the rule of law. The thing with international law is we don't really have international policemen, but so what we've had is de facto policemen, or at least people pick and choose the conflicts they get involved in, really for their own self-interest. It's not really policing the world. People have often talked about the US being the world police, but they're not. They don't get involved in every conflict. They get involved in conflicts that benefit them. But there isn't a global police force. So we have the UN, but the UN is somewhat toothless. There needs to be reform with Security Council seating and all sorts of stuff. But the problem that we have is that you have international law, and then the expectation that you're going to adhere to it. Otherwise, I don't know. Otherwise, the UN brings out resolutions, and maybe that there are ramifications in terms of trade or something, sanctions maybe, but yet the issue is that we do stand idly by because we don't have a police force. We have international courts that can make rulings, and then it requires us to kind of sanction nations like this as punishment. But the problem is sometimes sanctions punish us, right? So if you say, right, you can't buy Russian oil, then the price of oil goes up, and then that's inflationary. So these are difficult questions. I don't necessarily know the answer, other than we should try our hardest to get together as a United Nations, reform it so that you put pressure on nations who are doing things horrifically in their countries.
I've got a breaking news for you. It is now confirmed negotiations between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States have been postponed due to the war in the Middle East.
Unsurprising, but I
No,
think that's
not
more so
surprising.
an
We
excuse.
already heard about it, but now it's confirmed.
I think that's
So
an excuse. But good, because quite frankly, Steve Witkoff can jog on and he can go mess up some other part of the world. Because it's interesting that we heard today that the Iranian, no, not the Iranians, another Gulf nation complained that Steve Witkoff undermined the Iranian
100%.
because he either he did it on purpose or he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just wholly unqualified to do the job he's doing.
100%, completely agree. But what that means for Ukraine is status quo. The war continues. Ukraine will continue to strike Russian targets, and we are watching and expecting a large strike from Russia. Not predicting it. It's just the information's already there in public. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But there will not be the next round of negotiations, and no data scheduled.
Yeah, I'm putting up a load of comments that people can react to themselves. They're really good comments. We won't have time to deal with them all. Vigos, for example, there is one. This one I'm going to react to. Kevin Force says, "Is there a dumber name ever than Operation Epic Fury that sounds like something an 11-year-old on way too much Ritalin would say to his friends while playing Fortnite?" Now, there is a theory about this, Kevin, and there's a theory that they named this on purpose. They wanted, and I don't know if this is verified, but you can go and look it up. There's a theory they named it this because EP has the first two letters of the Epstein files. And so when you put Trump and start typing Epstein files, the idea that they wanted is that Epic Fury would be prompted by Google before the Epstein files. So there is a reason they chose an operation name starting with EP. That seems pretty plausible to me. I don't, I can imagine that is the case, but that's a very cynical move in naming the Operation Epic Fury. Stupidity in Essence says Denmark have built its own AI assistant similar to ChatGPT. They placed in Denmark with the Danish law and physical placed in Denmark. Another independent move. I understand what you're saying there. So yeah, again, moves from European nations to move away from American dependency or dependency on American AI and IT. So thanks for that input there, Stupidity, and thanks for the super chat. So we have AJ Simo saying, gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, AJ. We have John, really appreciate that. John saying, Middle East war, Europe's eyes are off Ukraine. Is that an American thing to take their lack of giving to Ukraine? I don't know. I think it's really to distract away from Epstein more likely than from Ukraine, but it probably serves the purpose of not needing to bother helping Ukraine.
I have an opinion on that.
Yeah?
Yeah. I have an opinion on that. I concur with that, but I'm going to say it a little bit differently. Donald Trump and Stephen Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Marco Rubio, and the list can go on, are learning that you cannot, and I'm sorry to lump these two together, but you just can't strong arm President Vladimir Zelensky. He is a world-class leader that is in that position for such a time as this. Excuse the biblical reference there. For such a time as this, he is leading his nation through a multifaceted war against what was the second army in the world, the greatest propaganda machines in the world, the love from world leaders of large countries like the United States and China. They have a very good regard, and I'm talking specifically Trump and Xi, very good regard of Vladimir Putin, fighting internal corruption, fighting governmental changes, fighting slander that he's nothing but a spinster with billions of dollars in a reserve fund and homes in the Canary Islands, never flinching, sacrificing his own life, his time with his family. He could have already been gone. We go back to this early days. I need ammunition, not a ride. And Donald Trump is recognized that he cannot move that man because he's fighting for his country's very existence. And he's recognized that Vladimir Zelensky actually has the cards. Secondly, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump loves him. His picture is hanging on the wall in the West Wing of the White House. We rolled out the carpet for a evil human being that slaughters people. And Donald Trump learned very quickly that this is a different kind of guy. I thought my friendship would do it. I thought my pressure on Zelensky, because I'm Trump, would force him to capitulate, give away the land. Let's create a business. We even have our own idiots in the United States. And I don't mean that personally, but when you have the audacity to say, well, listen, let's just get this over with. And J.D. Vance said, in a few months, they can start doing business together and forgive each other, Russia and Ukraine. They're clueless about the reality of the Russia-Ukraine war, and they have recognized that they need to distract away from their failures at bringing resolution to it. That's my sermon for the day.
And well said. Well said. I was seeing this, I thought was quite interesting, or at least I find it interesting. You might not. Just apropos to what I was saying earlier with regard to the UK's position and needing to get closer to Europe. I don't know if you've heard about the Made in Europe thing, which is supposed to be this thing that the EU is trying to support its own industry by having a kind of Made in Europe tag. There already is a Made in EU, but this is much more, I think, nuanced and involved. And anyway, we're now hearing signs of victory for UK lobbying after Peter Carl's visit to Brussels last week. The Financial Times reports that the European Commission is now proposing Made in Europe rules that would include Britain and other allies. If Britain is able to access that, that's a huge economic win for the UK. So anyway, it's not particularly important to what we're discussing right now, but just what I was saying earlier, as we are kind of on the outside looking in too often. Blonde Bombsheller giving some Greg Terry experience.
BB rocking in the house.
We have Lonely Avatar saying the world needs a liberal democracy with tea. This is definitely my opinion. Liberal democracies with tea and teeth. So I think this might come from something I said a couple of weeks ago, which is liberal democracies, unfortunately, they need teeth. You need a liberal democracy with teeth, because it's called the tolerance, the paradox of tolerance, which is that if you tolerate intolerance, it ends up coming to eat you. So if I tolerate like fascists and Nazis in my society, they will come and take advantage of me, and then they will stop there being democracy, and then I can no longer tolerate fascists. So you can't be so tolerant that you need teeth, basically. But someone misinterpreted that as tea. So you need liberal democracy with tea, which I also agree with, by the way.
Yes, tea and teeth. I shared maybe 45 minutes ago about the statement coming from Israeli source I trust about looking for ground activity. Now we're getting more statements. These are coming out of other nations that I trust in the Middle East. Truly dramatic events are ahead, and we confirmed this weekend will be extremely violent. We fully expect this campaign to move to some type of ground activity. In addition to that, do not forget that there is a war in Ukraine. Russia looking for every opportunity to gain momentum from that, pressuring through the media, gas, oil, blowing up of the pipelines, blowing up of ships. Expect major developments, but the trigger of this will be if you see a boot on the ground in Iran backed by the U.S. or Israel. So it's the same statement. It's the same statement. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. So just let's absolutely chomp through these, but thank you very much for them all. Ukraine says Stephen Bandal is getting money and production facilities in European countries. Long-range equipment will flow into Ukraine this year and fly on to Russia. This is something to be very hopeful about. As soon as there's indigenous production and production with co-production in Europe, Ukraine will be in a better place, is becoming to be in a better place.
At Papa Dutch, I'm reading every comment you put up there, buddy. Okay, I'm solo. No super chats because of an attack on my card account. Waiting for the new card. Papa Dutch, take care of yourself. Take care of that card, and we love you. And we've been reading your comments, brother.
Thank you, Stephen Bendel. That is a really
by the
good
way,
point.
Papa Dutch, stay away from the still. Stay away from the still.
Andrew Scully, Aussie here, sick of the BS from Trump. You don't have to be Aussie to be sick of that, I can tell you.
You can be an American and be sick of the
stupidity in essence. Putin has his hand far up Agent Krasnov during the war against Iran. So, yeah, Putin and, well, I don't know. It's interesting. The war in Iran benefits Ukraine in some ways and hurts him in others, and benefits Putin in some ways and hurts him in others. So I don't think Ukraine and Putin were on the agenda for considering whether to do Iran. I think it's more to do with domestic politics, and it's to do with Netanyahu and Netanyahu getting what he wants.
May I ask you a question on your opinion?
Yeah.
Okay. And in fact, let me do this, and it's going to be interesting. In fact, I'm not going. I use the still for fresh water. Okay, makes my porter look so much better. All right, I want to put a poll in here real quick. Engage. I'm going to start a poll, and then I'm going to ask you that question in a moment. So continue to talk. I'm going to put a poll in my community.
In your chat, yeah.
And I let it go for 5 minutes or so, and then I want to ask you the same question.
Yeah, okay. We have Daryl, and thanks for this, Daryl. Guys, who does the war benefit right now? Russia is out of money. Shouldn't the world be asking if it's possible Trump started this to bail out Putin? And if we can square that, where do we go from here? That was pretty much apropos to what we were just saying and what Stupidity in Essence was saying. So I think the war is neither to the benefit of either side intentionally. I think it hurts Russia long term, but short term it benefits Russia. So long term they lose an ally and they lose the ability to swap technology. Iran was buying lots of military kit from Russia. Russia was swapping technology and money and oil, whatever, not oil, but it, in the short term, it really benefits Russia. It may only last a week, right? But if gas and oil prices stay high, that benefits Russia, and that's how this war benefits Russia. But I think it's more complex, and that's what I'm saying for Ukraine as well. There's some ways it benefits Ukraine, some ways it hurts Ukraine.
Well, let me go ahead and answer because they're already clicking in there, and you actually asked the question that I asked. It's already approaching 100 votes, so we can call it what it is. I think the numbers will stay pretty accurate here now. Does the war in Iran benefit Putin in the long term? Those from my community on my channel right now are saying 62%, 63% no, 37% yes.
Yeah, so, I think it doesn't in the long term. I think he hurts in the long term.
Similar. I think also in the long term it will be not beneficial, but in the short term right now, it can be very beneficial.
Yes, it's all about the money. Yeah, and actually, that's not what Trump wants either. So Trump, like, it goes back to the questions we've already had. You know, the Straits of Hormuz. He wants that open because increased oil and gas prices hurt the economies of, well, predominantly the US. He'll be looking at. So he's not going to want that.
Okay, let's think about this logically versus just giving our opinion.
And by the way, this is worth, sorry, just because this is relevant. The world's second largest shipping company, says Kevin Force, just in Maersk, suspends all cargo bookings for the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and Iraq. Now, that is huge. That's massive. Absolutely huge.
Massive. And we were talking about that earlier. I talked about that earlier with Prof on a video when they had at the initial stages were rerouting their traffic. Now they're suspending the cargo shipment. So you're even to the next level. But back to the Putin short term. What has benefited already in the short term? Let's think about it. We are seeing the chatter of fuel. We'll just call it natural resources. Prices are rising, and in some ways supplies are limited. Even the Maersk there canceling the shipments. In the short term, those things can benefit Putin. Secondly, look at something that we just confirmed, and that is the negotiations that were on schedule for a couple of days from now have been now postponed indefinitely, is now definitely indefinitely, because I just got it now from the 4th or 5th source. So To me, you may say, okay, well, that benefits Ukraine. For me,
That's
that
an
benefits.
interesting one. That
For
could
me,
go either
that
way.
benefit. Yeah, it can. For me, that benefits Putin because he doesn't want to have any attention whatsoever on Ukraine. That's my angle on it. Right now, Ukraine's not in the news, or it's on the back page. Right now,
But I also
everything is
think
there.
it can benefit Ukraine because they're not getting pressured to concede territory and
Well,
stuff like that.
but with that said, Zelensky's already drawn not a red line, but a defended red line.
And Merck
US
showed a map to Trump last night, which is very useful.
Well, he's probably forgotten it by now, but you got to make sure that you really draw it with bright crown colors.
It's clear that Trump doesn't. I'm just reading something else about something else that Trump was making some comments about, that someone was saying he really doesn't understand. I think it was something to do with the Iran conflict, but he really doesn't understand stuff, and I think that's certainly the case with regard to the war in Ukraine as well. We're gonna, because I need to go and have some food with my
you
my
do,
folks.
and I'm not.
We've got a lot of super chats.
Keep going. I'm not feeling the best today as well. I'm going to get some rest after this live stream, and then I have some other things that I may put out in a video later, but maybe we'll take off until tomorrow. Not feeling too good.
Julian Roster, thank you. Perhaps Israeli intelligence has an unredacted copy of the Epstein files as leverage. This is something that has been talked about previously. The Iranians were also threatening this too, but they don't seem to have released it. So maybe it was just hot air. Schritz Dog has said, so wanted to go back to this Blue Stream thing. Maybe that is why Ukraine is hitting hard in the Black Sea, then starting attacking Russia proper when this supposed attack happens. I mean, they could want to put a stop to Druzhba. There are some theories that, you know, the Hungarians may have a point, that actually that is the Ukrainians stopping Druzhba from being used. The Europeans are now putting pressure on Ukraine to reopen Druzhba, and they're saying there are issues inside the pipe that you can't see from outside, but we need this, and like that have been destroyed by heat and blah 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 blah. So you're thinking, really? Okay. Anyway, that could go either way, but yeah.
Slovakia also today confirming that they will no longer, when Ukraine needs it, emergency rations, sending electricity into. They've concluded that. There's a lot of energy narratives here connected to Ukraine. 100%.
Yeah, and this might well also have something to, as you mentioned, Switchdog, might have something to do with what they are targeting outside of pipeline stuff. So yeah, Mitch Astown, thank you. China has been liking American stockpiles being drawn down and a lack of friends. So that's something we haven't talked about, but just very quickly, China benefits from the Iran war by point of fact that it weakens America's military, but it also sends a signal that they are capable of striking and doing an awful lot of damage. So I think China, on the one hand, will be like, use up all your weapons, but on the other hand, they're like, oh, they're pretty strong there. So I think it can probably do both, but it also distracts them as well. Stupidity in essence, Trump will probably send Witkoff and Kushner to trade insurance for the ships going through. He's a corrupt bastard. I don't disagree with that, Stupidity. Thank you for your super chat there. Putin Puppet says there was some time ago a rumor of US soldiers going into Hungary. The Epstein war class will everywhere try to rig elections and ending democracies. I mean, that's a super worry. As Greg's already said, there's been some, I wouldn't go so far as interference, but it looks like the Americans are very much pressuring for Orban to win there, as well as Putin. So it's really, really problematic. Jassian Terry says, could this work out in the longer term? More world awareness of the need for affordable drone and air defense, more global production, more for all. Yeah, if we hadn't learned from Ukraine, then we should
let me also speak there to Jassian Terry, and you have a great last name there. If Terry is your last name, but anyway, although it's spelt differently, but still phonetically sounds the same. Pete Hegseth just coming out on CNN stating we are impressed by the Shaheeds, and we are not able to take them out the way we thought we would be able to.
Which is what came out the classified briefing. So Chris Murphy from Connecticut, the senator from Connecticut, that was one of the things he said. He came out and said, and it turns out there's no answer for the Shahid. Well, I'll tell you what.
Well, there is an answer. It's called President Zelensky saying, hey, give me a 30-day ceasefire with Putin, force it, and I will come down there and bring my best of the best, and we'll take care of the Shaheeds for you.
Well, Kevin Force said this right at the top end. Zelensky floats swapping Patriot missiles for
that as well.
Increased Iranian Shahid threat, according to the Kyiv Independent yesterday. So, yeah, that is worth considering. As your man Oink 70 Oink F Oink says, evil thrives when good men do
100%.
nothing. This is also true. Krasnov did nothing to win the midterms from the beginning, only going for rigging in the US and everywhere else. Who will stop ICE in the blue states? So that's a very much an American comment. But I think we're starting to see a pattern of if you don't win elections, then you cheat or claim that you've had them rigged. So that is how he does things. Yes.
Papa Dutch, if you're dumb enough to attack a nation that your oil is being pumped through, you deserve to have Ukraine hijack it for their own use.
Yeah. Right. I don't disagree.
No.
Dunk on you. Yo, bro, you are the dog's bollocks. Oh, well, thank you. That is aimed at me. So thank you very much.
He did. He got
very,
you.
Very, very generous. Slava Ukraini, Herem Slava, for sure. We're just sort of cruising to the end here. Putin puppet, the Krasnov, blah, blah, blah. US can't stop Shahids and more. Let's keep it like that and worse ASAP. As a 2 NATO battalions were screwed up by 10 Ukrainians. I mean, goodness me, if we don't all learn, and that's slightly different from Shahed drones, but if we aren't learning that drones are the god of war at the moment, then where have you been for the last 4 years? Yeah,
and with that said, this is completely my opinion. Completely my opinion. I really, it goes back to Pete Hegseth 18 months ago, walking out with 4 little Mavics over his head and dropping a string down and saying, we've got the greatest drones on the planet. Okay, that's number one. Leads me to the knowledge that we all know that Ukraine and Russia are constantly developing better and better drone technology. And we also know it's obvious that Iranian drone technology is very advanced. And they are the initiator of the Shahed design and technology that Russia has now developed further. But with all of that said, and we did not talk about China very much, but man, when they put these 20 and 30,000 drones into the air and do light shows that are AI controlled, and they do, instead of fireworks, they're making all these images, it's daggone impressive. And if they're doing that on, for a celebration of the new year and beautiful to light up the sky, what can their military do with drones? And maybe they can't, but it sure is impressive.
Breaking news. The drone that flew into Cyprus to hit the UK RAF base, Akrotiri, was now the MOD is saying it wasn't sent from Iran, which is very interesting, and that potentially changes things. So where did that get sent from?
Where was it sent from?
Lebanon, Hezbollah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I don't know. So yes, thank you, Johnny Nevergard, for your super chat. Really appreciate that, mate.
Legend.
Paul Gilbert, good to hear from you. Are we worrying about the Christian nationalist army leaders telling their troops that they are doing God's work and starting Armageddon? We did reference that earlier.
We talked about it
previously on another video. It is definitely a problem, and I think there's some worry. There's been quite a bit of worry about this from a number of different places. There are a lot of complaints about this from military members themselves. That's how we heard about it. There was some, I don't know, 40 to 100 complaints. I can't remember. But so this is quite a widespread issue that it's being framed as a kind of quasi kind of crusade, a bit like Bush in Iraq. So yeah,
but it's different because when you look at it, it paints Trump as the initiator of the return of Christ and Armageddon. Okay,
and he's far from anything like that.
This is the pure evil, and this is why somebody like a Marjorie Taylor Greene today, and I've seen it multiple times now, coming out and going, if you are the savior of the world and the initiator of Armageddon and the initiator of the return of Christ, then why are you worried about if you're going to heaven? There's something wrong in your head when all you're talking about is, I wonder if I'm doing a good stuff to get to heaven. So it comes down to the deification in this hard right nationalism that I completely detest and stand against. Yeah. It is the deification of President Donald Trump. His own advisors to the White House who come in and pray for him. Paula White, for example, has made the statement multiple times: to say no to Trump is to say no to God. Okay, we're in very dangerous territory.
Yeah. Stupid.
You're in my wheelhouse there, brother.
Yeah, we Europeans and other supporters
I thought I'd get an amen. I thought I'd get an amen from you.
You know what? Amen, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that is really good to hear, because, like I say many times, like, secularism is a friend to everyone.
Yes.
People don't think it is, but it literally is the only way to exist in a pluralistic society. You've got to have that. There's a reason why the founding fathers had a separation of church and state. It's just practically you got to have it. We Europeans and other supporters of Ukraine need to keep focus on Ukraine. Agent Krasnov and his Russian
100%.
love are trying to divert us in the wrong direction. Funny when Russia begins to show weakness. As Greg will do, of course, but I will have my hits and losses video every single day of the war in Ukraine. It's just, I haven't had a day off since I started doing them. In something like, I don't know, 3.5 years, I've not had a day off. Whether ill, on holiday, or Christmas Day, and it's like one of those things that when you're hooked into some kind of streak on one app or another, you have to get your daily bonus. That's what I'm like with doing my hits and losses videos. So unless I my arms are hanging off by a thread and I've been knocked over by a bus or something, I will be doing my hits and losses videos. So that's guaranteed. And I'm sure the same with you.
Yeah, I believe that what we're witnessing here in 2022 through today and into tomorrow and so on and further is a major transition time for our entire planet. And I want to do my part to stand for what is right and share a message and bring people together and educate and learn. Because this is not normal. This is uncharted territory.
I don't know if it's true, but I've just read that Barron Trump, younger son of Donald Trump, bought $30 million of oil 2 days before the war started. If that's not insider trading, I don't know what it is. But I don't know if that's true. So just pinch yourself.
It would not be surprising.
No, of course not. So Putin puppet, striking similarity and incompetence between Russia and the US administration. The Russification of MAGA and Russians is equal. Epstein war class mafia. I mean, there's an awful lot of ideas wrapped up in that comment, but yeah, I think there are some interesting similarities between MAGA and Russia. I mean, I remember the T-shirts being worn by a couple of people at a Trump rally. Was it in Trump 1.0? But it's like, I'd rather vote for the Ruskies than for a Democrat or something like that. It's like there is that commonality going on there. Anyway, Just Not Good says, if regime change results in a pro-Russian one, then Russia benefits. Yeah, and the problem is trying to work out whether what's going on in Iran is good or bad depends on an accurate prediction of the future, and we just don't know. And when you don't know what's going to happen, and if there's no plan for something to come about, then it's even more risky. And this is what Greg was saying at the beginning. Without a plan, you just it's ridiculous. Right, we're almost there. I've Gone Fishing says, what are your thoughts on Reza Pahlavi taking over? I don't know enough about him.
I do not also know enough about Reza Pahlavi. I know that he has said many good things, that he has lineage, but he has been outside of Iran, and I don't know. We need to see. In fact, I'm watching it. This is interesting because Caroline Levitt just had a press conference, and my Israeli guys I follow closely made very, very sharp notation about what she said. She was updating the war, but she specifically did not go into regime change. She said that will be up to the Iranian people. We're not here for a regime change. So that narrative already shifting or adjusting as we go day by day by day. So I don't think anyone can predict what's going to happen because it comes back to the same story. We do not know what the end game is, but as far as Reza Pahlavi, I don't know enough about him, but everything I've seen has been positive for me.
Yeah. iShares, MSCI, EU Industrial, EU. I don't know what any of this means. Putin puppet, but EU weapons. I think is an advocacy for buying EU weapons in Europe. My company bought a lot of it. Not any US investment anymore. What I can say to this is that there has been a record investment, I think, in EU companies and EU stock markets, as people are, and I've talked about this at length before, but the EU is necessarily more stable because of proportional representation and an international organization that is built up of lots of proportional representation countries that can't flip-flop like this so easily. And so the EU is generally quite bureaucratic and stable. And it means that if you are a long-term investor in or venture capitalist or whatever, the EU is going to be more of a stable place to invest. But at the moment, Trump is showing that the US, which used to be the place to invest, if you're going to flip-flop and put tariffs on and be unpredictable, then that's not going to be the place to invest. And so I think there's definitely something in that. But thank you for
Johnny,
the chat.
Do me a favor, show this. This is my problem right here. It's just the way Ukraine is treated. I just popped the video in there for you. This is just coming
I've got to remove mine. Just before I do,
when you get a moment.
Wonders do happen, JP said. Amen.
The president in
possibly.
that post was pointing out that unfortunately we had a very stupid and incompetent leader in this White House for 4 years who gave away many of our best weapons for nothing, for free, to another country very far away by the name of Ukraine. So the president was pointing out how that was an unwise decision, but nevertheless, don't doubt the strength and the might of the American military.
It's just
that makes me my top. That makes me want to blow my top.
Not only, it's not the words, it's the attitude. Listen,
For
you're
no
getting
reason.
For no reason.
Just I had them in my pocket and I thought, I might as well give them to Ukraine.
Far away. That country, Ukraine. Yeah.
Oh man. Right, I'm going to move on. I'm angry. John says Qatar linked to Russia on the peace plans, now being hit by a Russian ally. What I find really interesting is a UN resolution on Ukraine recently. All the countries that abstained, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the whole suite of these countries, UAE, abstained from supporting Ukraine. And now they're like, oh, Ukraine, can you help us with intercepting Shahed drones? If I was Ukraine, I'd be like, yeah, I'll tell you what, you're changing your votes in the UN next time. 100%. Seb's here. Thank you on behalf of Greg. What are your thoughts on UK, French, and other countries getting involved in a war that could spread and pull them into a greater war via bases? Okay. Right, we sort of talked about this. France is not having anything to do with it from an American point of view, but they are protecting their own interests. Then the idiocy of Iran was to strike at, well, I was going to say to strike at UK base, but it turns out it wasn't an Iranian drone. But let's assume this, like striking at UK interests and French interests, is it then gets France and UK involved in the war. But we are not going to do it offensively. And what you will know, if you want to understand why Keir Starmer is doing what he's doing and not going any further than defensively, is because he has learnt from the Blair support of Bush in Iraq. And this absolutely killed, like, the biggest protests in British history were the protests against the Iraq war. So Keir Starmer, from a legal point of view, very much knows what is which side which side his bread is buttered, right? And he absolutely will be having the legacy of Iraq at the forefront when he's making decisions over Iran.
Do you want to know what the hard right Christian nationalists are saying about Starmer? You're not going to see it on the public notices out there. Do you know what they're saying?
No.
They're saying that Starmer is afraid to get active in the war because there are so many Muslims living in the UK, and he's concerned about an uprising.
So, of course, he doesn't understand the difference between Shiite and Sunni.
I understand. I'm just saying that
that comes from Trump. And
absolutely
Trump's getting that from somewhere. So Trump talks about Sharia law. He's been primed that. So someone around like Stephen Miller or someone is feeding Trump absolute nonsense there. I just want to. There are lots of people talking about Starmer's reaction being in the context of here it is. So Lewis Goodall. here's an example. If I show this, sorry, I'm trying to finish the video so that I can go and eat with my missus. But oh no, I need to get rid of that and add this to the stage and then take that down. So Lewis Goodall here from the news agent says it's been said a lot that the shadow of Iraq is hanging over Keir Starmer and the Labour Party during this Iran crisis. It absolutely should. What's remarkable is how little much of the British media and the rest of politics seem to be thinking about it at all or learning its lessons. Those lessons are far deeper and broader than the danger of boots on the ground. There's this really interesting hypocrisy where people who have criticized Labour in the past for what they call the illegal war in Iraq and now sometimes the people who are calling for us to get involved in supporting the US in Iran. It's like, hang on, you used to slag off Labour for getting involved in Iraq, and now you're slagging off Labour for not getting involved in Iran. What the hell's going on there? Anyway, I thought that was an interesting point. And so we just got, I think, maybe three more. We have Mitch Astown. Peace and love. Your neighbor not doing great at the moment, sadly.
Yeah, 100%, brother.
Like the world is an unstable place. Yeah, but thank you, Mitch. It's really, really kind. Like, you know, yeah, love thy neighbor is not something that is being adhered to very much at all, sadly. Just not. Oh,
before you go in there, it's just not good. Because the question earlier was about, you know, France, UK, European nations. Emmanuel Macron posting today, I met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Lebanese President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister and so on. He just reiterates the French support for the Lebanese people. So if you look for other angles, and we know that the Charles de Gaulle is en route to the operation zone.
Yeah, the French carrier group.
Yeah, the French carrier. So it could be something of this nature that brings maybe a France into the fray even more. So we just have to keep our eyes on those stories, because right now anything can go sideways. And go ahead and get that one, and then I'll give you my last thing here, because one of the most kind of straight-lined Russian analysts I follow, who calls it straight, like we're losing in Ukraine, just posted something, and I want to read it. It's pretty interesting.
Yep, just the last super chat here for you. Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? I don't know why you get me to say this. And expel demons in your name and perform many powerful works in your name. And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Get away from me, your work of lawlessness.
Hallelujah. Yes. And ladies and gentlemen, we have breaking news here. Jonathan M.S. Pierce just read the Bible on this live stream and an AM. But the reality, I know you have written a whole book on the Bible, so no, all good, my friend. But the reality is that that statement there is in reference to, you know, the works of Donald Trump and well, look at the powerful things I've done. You know, never knew you get away from me, you worker of iniquity. Now, I want to read this before you get to anything else as we close out. 5 days have passed since the start of U.S. Operation Epic Fury to overthrow the current political regime, destroy its military and nuclear capabilities. However, it appears that at this point, the U.S. objectives have not been met. They say so themselves. And Iran continues to show resilience and responsiveness, suggesting that it has prepared for a long war of attrition. In fact, I can tell you that Iran today started using their Haddock 112 drones, or Haddock 110, Haddock 112, whatever it is. It's even way better than the Shaheeds. They just started using those. The U.S. government is forced to request money to continue a war that will last months, rather than a week-long operation after failing to meet its objectives. So he's predicting what will happen. Meanwhile, its allies in the Gulf are suffering direct consequences of seeing their infrastructure destroyed, their energy production reduced or stopped in the case of Qatar and LNG, their economies damaged in the example of $250 million per day lost by Dubai International Airport, and their dependence on Washington for military capabilities being exposed. The winners ultimately in this will be the U.S. military-industrial complex, which sees a long-term war with Iran as a new way to increase revenue in the event of Iranian defeat and the possibility of expanding its markets into the Persian Gulf even more. So that's their view.
It's interesting. I heard the CEO of Eurosam, is it? SAMT manufacturers, the parallel to or the alternative to the Patriot. They were saying, hey, in the short term, you can buy off us. You know, they are saying, because there's a big bottleneck for Patriots, and if Eurosam can really ramp up their production, then there's definitely an opportunity for them. But not that I'm advocating profiteering off the back of war here. But there you go. Yeah. Look. Just thank you very much for your
this
time.
Was a great...
I will have to probably shoot, or I'll be castrated.
No,
formally.
We definitely don't want the bollocks castrated. So, did I say that properly?
You did. You did. I was just
I'm learning. I'm learning from you.
You are learning. Yeah.
No, but thank you to everybody. Thank you to all the moderators. Thank you to everyone that has gifted a super chat and have been a part of our conversation, gifting memberships. We thank you all. Johnny's heading to dinner, and I think I'm going to probably end up resting this afternoon, man. I just feel like a wrung out dish rag. But this has been good. You guys are caught up as of right now. You're caught up 100% as of March the 4th, 2:23 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8:23 p.m. UK. And this is where we're at with Ukraine. Russia. We were able to break some news about, the talks being moved out, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where we're at.
Thanks in the background. JR was curating.
Thank you to all the mods. And
but JR didn't know what to
exactly
read out in the super chat. So thank you.
JR is a stud. I've met him as well in Ukraine. So thank you guys. We appreciate each and every one of you, and also for everyone spending these 2.5 hours with us. We will see you on the next one. Make sure you have the notification bell on. Be blessed.
Yeah, absolutely. Slava Ukraini.
Geroim Slava.